Hello, this is Jerry. I'm playing Oxygen Not Included, and I'm starting off this episode at a risk of losing my second beta hive here. So I've got to very quickly find a place for this water to go. I can either dig down, or if it's thin enough, possibly sweep it out. So that beehive is currently flooded, so I'm digging down. The water's going to go in. And that looks like it is healthier, not flooding anyways. One of the downsides though is there's no beta critters flying around it, so they aren't going to be picking up uranium ore and turning it into rich uranium. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop off one of the critters, and it seems when they're adults you can't wrangle them. So I'm going to get one of the babies on the ground and send them over there. Also start working on the path to a cold carbon dioxide geyser. I've gotten the data disk from this desk, and I want to destroy it because it's in a place where I want to have some atmo suits enter, because the area underneath is just packed with carbon dioxide, and I have a lot of projects in that area for my dupes to do, so 3 atmo suits are going to go up and be filled. In the last episode, I put together a deep freeze system on the right of these 2 rooms, and I'm storing food on the top and ingredients on the bottom. The bottom is where the kitchen is, but the top area is where I can now construct a new Great Hall. And that is in a perfect location, because on the right side of the Great Hall is where the food's stored. So every time my dupes want to eat, they'll just run through, grab the barbecue meat that is frozen at the moment, and be able to find a table here to be able to eat it, getting a morale bonus, and actually the bonus from the high quality food as well. The Atmos suits stations are going to need power, and I'm also going to need to produce a few extra Atmos suits themselves. In the last episode, I had forgot to bring plastic with me when I went back to the Desolance now. So what I'm doing is I'm directing oil to an oil refinery that's going to temporarily exist just to produce enough plastic to create at least 1 steam turbine. So I've had my dupes create that second Great Hall. I can now destroy the other one, getting all my dupes to eat at the new one that is designed for up to 20 dupes. Digging up on the right side of the polluted water to oxygen system so I can get rid of that hydrogen and potentially start to make use of that space. So this is going to be the location of the steam turbine in Desolance. So just building ladders over, and that insulated tile is made out of ceramic. So underneath that is where hot steam is going to be. That's why I've got the drywall there, and that's going to allow my aqua tuner to run and be cooled off. So this is one way to do it. I'm going to get my dupes to collect enriched uranium here, and that's going to very easily give me the sweeter than honey, which gets one of my dupes to extract some without getting stung. Well, there are no actual critters flying around anyway, so of course they didn't get stung. Building a path up to the carbon dioxide geyser, and doing it in such a way that the carbon dioxide isn't going to leak into my base. Primarily doing this so I can analyze it, so I'm going to get a few extra data banks rather than use the excessive amount of carbon dioxide, because my base is producing enough as it is for my small amount of space flights. Building a ladder up to the other beta hive, I want to be able to wrangle one of those and bring them to the other, so I've got critters flying around both hives. So I now have enough plastic to create a steam turbine, 200 kilograms worth, so I'm going to put that up here. Also going to destroy this battery because although it's made of steel, its overheat temperature is 175, but the overheat temperature of the aqua tuner is 325 because it has a higher base overheated temperature than most other machines. And I want that area underneath to be able to get as hot as possible. So I'm going to move the battery somewhere else to make what I call a hydro battery. I'm building a liquid reservoir underneath the steam turbine system, and this is going to contain the coolant. So I'm going to choose polluted water for that since I'm really not using it for anything else. So that's going to be stored in there, and it's going to cycle all around the base. Well, it's going to start off primarily just hitting the oil well, reducing the heat from that, and going in the aqua tuner when it needs to be cooled. And then the steam turbine itself is going to deal with the heat that comes from the aqua tuner. So I had a PIP previously plant two wheezy worts that's producing radiation. I've got a red bolt generator there, but it doesn't have any power. So just going to connect a path of heavy watt wires to it. Here I'm just having one of the baby beta critters be wrangled, and I'm going to bring them to the other hive. Also going to shut that area off so those critters don't fly around. I can already see one has escaped a little bit further, so I'm also going to build a wall to help prevent them, because I want them to stay around the hive. Otherwise they're not going to have a food source and not going to be helping me produce enriched uranium for future projects. Set both hives to auto extract, or have my dupes auto extract enriched uranium whenever it's inside there. Now I'm not sure if that enriched uranium sitting on the ground is going to be consumed by those critters, so I'm going to build a bin and store all my enriched uranium that I'll use in future projects there. So now I'm building a path at the bottom of my base, just above the hot lava or magma, and I'm going to build a set of steam turbines that's going to produce power when the solar panels are not generating enough electricity. I'm constructing a dip down station where my dupes are going to go up and down through liquid, so it controls the pressure. Now I got a lot of hydrogen. I don't want that hydrogen to escape the beta hive area, and I'm going to need another one past that, because I'm ultimately going to have a vacuum area where the steam turbines are. Now I'm just setting this bin to store the enriched uranium. Here I'm selecting 10 tiles to be the top of my steam turbines. I'm making sure they're cold. You'll not want to select hot abyssallite for this project. Okay, so I've got the core place where 2 steam turbines are going to be, so I can actually have those installed, and I'm going to bring power to them so that when they eventually run, I actually will draw power into my main base when those solar panels aren't producing enough, because it's nighttime, for instance. Now I'll destroy some of the old wiring that I had come down here that was accessing or giving power to a pump, and have the heavy watt wire do the job for this project. So now I've built the second dip down area, which I'm going to flood with salt water, and that's going to prevent the vacuum that I'm going to build on the left side with the steam turbines from being broken. I'm very paranoid about having natural tiles create or hold a vacuum. So what I'm doing is I want to build actual tiles to make sure that I maintain a vacuum in the steam turbine area. Also started building a spot for a third steam turbine down here. So I noticed a few tiles are taking pressure damage, and this has happened before. So I'm dropping liquid off, and because I've got a mix of liquid, the actual water sitting on top of the salt water is not letting it to sort of vent out, so it's building up in a very high pressure way underneath there. Anyway, you can see I swept that little bit of water and it just exploded out. This is at least going to prevent further damage to those tiles. As I'm building the ceiling to this system, 2 tubes get stuck and they can't dig their way out because they don't have the ability to do that digging. So what I'm going to do is give an extra dupe the ability to dig through that and set that to be a high priority. So hopefully they'll be able to get back to the rest of the base soon. So I'm just about to seal off the steam turbine areas. I'm going to build 2 pumps. I'm going to make the big pumps. Because there's a lot of gas in this area, I'm not going to use the smaller pumps like I did in the area that had a little bit of carbon dioxide in the previous episode. So this is ultimately just going to need to power them in, but this will just make that vacuum in this area. So in this system here, I need to give a operation skill to actually be able to construct a steam turbine. So one of my dupes in the Dessa lens now has that skill. Also going to build a shutoff for water, because I want a lot of water to be underneath this steam turbine and a little bit of water of sitting on top of it to maintain its temperature and keep it under 100 degrees. So connecting the water line to that, powering it, and I'm going to have a powering it up and having a shutoff button so I can turn it on and off as needed. Now I'm going to seal off the aqua tuner area, but I'm going to make sure that I get power into that zone, and that will allow me to fill that with water. Just before I connect the final wire to the generator, or the rebel generator, I'm going to have a shut off here, because I want to be able to control when it's on and off. And initially it doesn't need to be on, because those rad bolts currently aren't configured to go anywhere. Starting the research for rad bolt joint plates so I can maintain atmosphere temperature while sending rad bolts through that area in the decimal lands where I have the rad bolt generator. That research is going to require data banks, and that can only be done in space. So I'm going to have a specialized rocket for generating data banks. So inside this rocket, I'm going to put on the bottom left the station required to make data banks, and that is going to give us the input to the virtual planetarium to do some of the more advanced research, such as a rad bolt joint plate. So I want to have the operator of this to have light, so it's going to have the automatic sensor to turn that on and off. And I'll put in my standard piping and water so I can store water for the lavatory and have a little bit of extra oxygen when the rocket goes up, so I don't have to completely rely on algae. Just realized that this line that I've connected to, or almost connected to the steam turbines, is oil instead of water, and that wouldn't have been any good. So now I'm just directing actual water. I'm going to, at the high priority, build that tile there so it doesn't waste the atmosphere. Okay, so this rocket is going to have a place to store food. Now I can freeze my food on my base, so if I can get it here in a vacuum area, it'll last forever. And that's going to be important because the dupe that is here will need to be up in space for quite a while, because I need to produce quite a bit of data banks ultimately to do all the research. So I'm going to have some liquid dropped off here. I'll use salt water, as I know we've got a lot sitting around the base. And I'm going to sweep up the rest, and this is going to act as the ability to keep a vacuum on the right side where my food exists, but give my dupes access to go in and grab food as they need, and that food will be stored in that ration box. And the nice thing about that is I can control how much food goes up in that, so I have not an excessive amount, but the right amount for the amount of time that I'm going to have the dupe producing data banks. So the reason I have a rad bolt generator in the decimal lens is so that I can power an interplanetary launcher. So I can send oil and perhaps some other materials as well, though primarily oil, from this planetoid to my homeworld for processing. I'm going to start to put some rad bolt reflector in place that ultimately will have that, and might as well put a solar panel underneath it. So as long as you build tiles out of mesh tiles or possibly airflow tiles, the solar panel under a building will still pick up some power. So here I'm just going to have the dupes put the floor to the ration box, and just once this is created, I'm going to give them the ability to start to go upstairs by accessing two tiles on the left side of that ration box so they can step up on it. And I'm ultimately going to put a oxygen diffuser on top of that mesh tile on the left. Also like it being made out of mesh, so if it was ever a situation my dupes got sick and were to essentially put polluted water on the floor, that will not that'll be diverted down to the control area instead of the food area. I don't want polluted water to go inside the food area because that ultimately produces polluted oxygen and will make the food go bad. But anyway, as you can see, I'm now putting in power and putting the upstairs to this rocket together. So I'm going to have a lavatory on the right, battery on the far left. That's going to be inside a mess hall. And I'm going to make sure that I can get a manual generator together with a cot. So the only actual room that I've got here is I believe going to be the mess hall for this particular rocket. So now I'm throwing the switch here and allowing water to be dumped on top of the steam turbine. And I'm going to do this till it gets about roughly 75 kilograms, in which case I can now shut it off as it is now. I'm going to destroy that liquid vent and now start to have water be filled inside the steam turbine chamber underneath where the aquatuner is. So I'm going to fill that up 3 tiles high. Do not want it to have it completely full so that I can vent water back out there. Alright, just looking for some excess lead to be able to build some systems, and that will probably run for quite a while. While I'm waiting for that to fill, I also want to cool down the top of the steam turbine, because if it ever gets above 100 degrees, it won't work. So this cooling line that's going to cool down the oil well will also cool the top of this. So I'm going to have an in and out line. I'm going to have radiant pipe on top of the steam turbines and having that deliver this polluted water in such a way that that'll keep it cooler. Just putting the last finishing touches on the research rocket. That's going to have a manual generator for power, a place to eat inside a new mess hall. It already has a cot, lavatory, and then the other bit is a storage bin and the oxygen diffuser. And the storage bin is for plastic. I'm going to actually make a second one for algae over there. Okay, couldn't quite get my dupes to construct two pipes over in the far corner, so I'm going to have to destroy the lavatory, build a temporary ladder, and then reconstruct it later. Before my deep freeze system, I had to control how many critters I would attack at a time because meat goes bad pretty quickly. But now that I've got a deep freeze system, I can attack all the critters I want, produce a massive amount of meat, which ultimately goes to barbecue, and not be concerned because that'll last forever in my system. I wish one of the traits of a dupe would be the fact that they're extra tall and could reach higher. Anyway, I'm caught in a situation where they can't reach the spot. Perhaps the new trait could also be the fact that they could jump higher, because no dupes are able to get up to this particular location. So I'm going to put a ladder so they can get up there. Over here, I'm going to make sure engineer is on the far left, because they're the loud sleeper. I tend to forget that aspect. So now having plastic and algae be loaded inside my rocket, because they're both going to be essential for building the databanks and life-sustaining systems. I'm also going to have barbecue meat put in the ration box, but only that I specifically sweep, because I want to make sure it's only the cold barbecue that they put in there. Okay, so now I'm destroying this temporary ladder so they were able to build those pipes. And once that is down, I can build a lavatory for my dupe that's operating in this area to use. I'm going to be running out of water in this space because I'm filling up a lot of water in this hydro battery system. So before I do, I'm digging out some algae. I'm going to have that loaded in my ship. So because my homeworld rocket, in particular the research rocket, is in need of algae. Also going to be deconstructing the vacuum area on the left. I'm going to build a second liquid reservoir because it's more important for me to bring water back. I've got a new system. I'll eventually be able to send oil to my homeworld. Also got so low with water that the water oxygen system is not operating. I'm going to start burning algae. So while my dupes were creating this research rocket, I was able to get a vacuum created with the two pumps here. So now I'm ready to start construction again. So digging out underneath it, that is going to be the spot where water is going to be thrown in. It's going to get really hot, turn to steam, and go into the steam turbines producing some power. And then from there, that'll go as water out of it and into a liquid reservoir, which I can push back underneath if I'm in need of more power. Just before I send this rocket back home, just digging out a little bit of extra algae to put that inside the rocket. So now I've got an area underneath the steam turbines. So what I want to do is I want to drop some water or other liquid. I'll use salt water since it's pretty much lined up and ready to go. I want to put that on top of the steam turbines just so that that'll take on the heat from it. And then I'm going to use a radiant pipe to keep that liquid cool, which ultimately is going to keep the steam turbines cool. Also dropping a liquid vent underneath this system. This is where I'm going to throw in water. Also have a temperature gauge to check if it's too hot. And the logic that I'm going to have is I'm going to have a separate battery later on, and that's going to go through an ore. It's basically going to say if the temperature of the steam that's in there, oh no, this has started to go off. I did not intend that to be the case. That may be okay. If they build this really quickly and I shut that off, this may not be the end of the world. You've got to be very careful with liquid in this system, in particular salt water, polluted water, all that, because if that interacts with that hot magma, I could be done for. I may have to go back if I'm not careful, but it looks like I'm okay. So I got a liquid shut off there because I want to control when I put water into that system. I don't want to just put water in it just because the steam turbines are outputting it. I've got a liquid reservoir to store that hot water of 95 degrees. I'm putting that with an OR gate. So that's basically saying only let the water through if I'm need of power at 90%, or I'm getting overheating which is, I'm going to set it at about 500 degrees. If it gets 500 degrees or hotter in there, then yeah, just throw some extra water only in those two conditions. I have close to a full bin of algae on my rockets, but just digging out just a little bit more before I go back home. So that liquid shut-off is going to need power, so just connecting that bit in there. So I'm going to have to have a separate steam turbine up in this area that is going to also have aqua tuner in it. And the purpose for this is strictly to keep the steam turbines underneath cool. So well, with over half a bin of algae is in there, so I'm now going to send this rocket back to my home world. So I'm going to add tile line by line here because ultimately I want to extend the vacuum area, because this area with aqua tuner that's going to be running is going to get very hot. I just want to keep a vacuum around it. So building up a ladder so I can destroy the tiles underneath it. This is very similar to what I've done in the deep freeze system in the last episode. Alright, so this rocket has arrived. The dupe was sick on the way, or rather just made a mess. So I'll get that cleaned up. I'm also going to have algae be put in this bin at high priority, because I'm going to send this rocket back to the Deso lens once it's filled up with water, because I'm in desperate need of having water back be provided in that asteroid. So inside this one, now I'm getting the algae inside the rocket that is going to do the data research. Just giving out some skills here. Going to give some operating skills to artist. An engineer, actually might have either artist or engineer be the crew for this. Actually, they're going to need, let's choose engineer. They're also going to need the rocket skill, because they actually need to send the rocket up, unless I want to have two dupes, which I think would be wasteful. So with this rocket, I actually only need to have it go one tile away from the planet. It could just be anywhere in space. So I'll do that. Now I will select this food here, because I realized I didn't tag the food that was frozen. So this is very important, because I only specifically want this frozen food to be put in the rocket. By the way, if I didn't put frozen food in there, it would go bad, and I lose that vacuum area, and ultimately make all the food go bad. So what I'm doing here is connecting the line that is going to send, now so that liquid reservoir is filled with polluted water. I can now build the line that's going to send it all around the base, primarily the oil well and on top of the steam turbines. I'm also going to have a temperature gauge there to tell the aqua tuner when it needs to operate. And I'm going to have that set to 20 degrees. So if the polluted water gets more than 20 degrees, the aqua tuner will operate. I can see barbecue meat has been loaded here. 2 grams or kilograms is giving me 8,000 calories, which is good for 8 cycles. I want to actually double that, so up that to 4. And now my dupes will have, my dupe that's going to be up here will have 16 days approximately with 16,000 calories. So I feel a little bit more comfortable with that instead of the 8,000. Okay, now that I've got algae on the rocket, I've got plastic, all the equipment, food is in there for 16 cycles or so. I can tell engineer to board. We're going to choose a location that is right next to the planetoid. No point in going far away. They'll take off. Make sure their atmo suit is off when they're on board, and they can begin production. And I'm just going to infinitely produce this as long as there's plastic. I even have an auto sweeper there, so they can pretty much just do this all day long, except for when they need to take a break. They've got the lavatory and food and all that, and a manual generator will need to operate every now and then. Before this rocket goes back to the Deso lens, I'm going to build the 3rd liquid reservoir, and I'm going to move the shut-off to the far right corner. Because one thing I definitely do not want to have happen is have water go into my into space as I'm traveling. So I'm going to make sure that is an off position before I take off. Okay, this is weird. I thought I had constructed the lavatory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to land back down, construct it, and take off again. So I'm now taking off again now that I got the lavatory. And this time I'm going to go on the left side of the planet. And the reason for that is just because there's no benefit. So the polluted water line isn't able to completely get through, and that's because I had a temporary oil line installed. And I don't need that anymore, at least I'm hoping. So I'm going to destroy that and let the pipes be connected so that I can get polluted water going down around the oil well. So I'm building some insulated tiles made out of ceramic, and I'm really happy I've got the polluted water to oxygen system that made a lot of clay, so I can get tons of ceramic for this. Now, I could have made this my life a little bit easier if I had have built the ceramic before those other tiles, but if I just build tiles underneath, again reinstalling, I can get the tiles on top. That's where the steam turbine is going to sit, and I need 5 tiles of that. So now I'm building the line that's going to go around the 3 different steam turbines and keep all 3 of them cool with the help of the aquatuner that's going to be on underneath the top steam turbine there. I think I'll just use salt water just because that's in the area. Alright, just mopping up oil that came out of the destruction of some pipes, connecting power to the solar panels and to the future interplanetary launcher, and I'm going to have the joint plate for the red bolts built, but I can't do that unless I destroy one of the tiles. So I'm going to have one of the dupes destroy that, and when it's ready to be built, build it at a high priority such that I don't lose too much oxygen. So I've managed to both unload algae from this rocket and load 3 liquid reservoirs of water so I can send it back to the Desolens to fill the system that underneath the steam turbine and produce oxygen as well in that asteroid. So here I'm putting in another steam turbine on top of the system where the aquatuner will exist. So I'm going to have another solar panel built next to the bottom one. So I'm just building a ladder access so I can get to the Interplanetary Launcher to construct it. So the rocket has returned, so I can go inside and enable the liquid shutoff so that water can be loaded into the system. And actually going to do a little fix here so water goes into this liquid reservoir before it goes into the oxygen system. I have a similar system for the washroom, but I didn't quite finish that one. Now that the rocket's back, I've got glass to construct the solar panel. So all the plastic is in the research rocket. So I had to have that land down here so that I can construct my steam turbine that I want to build in that system. And once that is built, I can get engineer to go back inside and go back up in space. Just finishing the last touches of the cooling line, putting the temperature setting on the temperature gauge to be 20 degrees so that polluted water can go all around this line. I've started producing more steel and I ran out of lime. I've got tons of eggs. So I got a bin built down here. I'm going to switch that out from iron ore to have eggshells. Hopefully those pips aren't going to spill too much on the ground. Not that it really matters. The main point is I'm going to have a sweeper here to actually have the eggshells loaded into that system so I can produce lime. Also need to have an additional dupe, have the Menotronics engineering. I hate relying on just engineering. So here you can see the polluted water go around the entire system. I'm also going to have 2 batteries built, and that is going to be an integral part of the hydro battery system that's going to help my red bolt generator out. Just noticed that the first glossy Draco has been born inside this stable, and that's going to produce plastic instead of fiber reed. Okay, more fun with pipes. This is not going to be nearly as bad as the deep freeze system with all the other pipes that were around it, but I'm going to have a saltwater line go all the way around. I'm going to have a water line go into the chamber to keep that aquatuner cool. I also have another line with the steam turbines on the bottom that's going to act as the ultimate power system, delivering water inside that liquid reservoir that can be directed underneath it again if power is needed. So these 2 batteries are what allows me to make this steam turbine with eventually hot steam turn into a battery system. So when the solar panels turn off, I can rely on power from this. So I've got an OR gate with one side that has a battery on it and the other side has a temperature gauge. And this works very similar to the one that I'm actually building on the other base. So basically going to say if it needs power or if it's getting too hot in there, turn the steam turbine on, but only in that condition. So this is a NOT gate after a battery, and that's going to be connected with an AND gate. So I've got an OR gate on top. This is going to be an AND gate. And what this is basically going to say, if the temperature needs to be cooled, that polluted water is above 20 degrees, and you have enough power, then and only then operate the aqua tuner. Just so essentially, if you start to not have enough power, probably because the solar panels aren't getting light because it's night, then turn that machine off, conserving power. So the settings I'm going to use on the left battery is going to be 190, and the one on the right I'm putting 80 for the time being. So I did some digging on the left side of the steam turbine, so I'm going to make sure that gets shut off again. And also, it is time, now that I've got the appropriate amount of steel, to build my aqua tuner. So that's going to sit right there. And I'm going to make sure that has power. I'm going to use the highly conductive wires, just for future-proofing this section. Just digging out a little bit of lead that's in this area over here. So now I've got about 3 tiles worth of water in that system, so I can shut this system off. In fact, I can even destroy it, diverting the water back into the base. Right now I'm from the future. Ooh, about 3 or 4 cycles ago in the future, I had to rewind to this point. Basically, because I had some ice and other materials that turned to liquid that interacted with the very hot abyssalite that's on the bottom and produced a lot of hot steam. And I don't want that to happen again. So what I'm doing is I'm mopping up excess water. Any bottled water is being dropped off. Any material such as ice or that is sitting on top of the steam turbines, they're all going. Get out, and I'm also bringing up the water line over here because I'm concerned about that overfilling. Do not want water inside this base. By the way, I had to restart about 3 times. It is so finicky. This is probably the more risky project to do, because the moment you've got water hitting that hot abyssalite, or worse, the magma, it's nearly game over. So have lots of save points if you're going to construct one of these systems, is my advice. So I have a lot of dupes carrying material, so I'm going to give out a lot of carrying skills. So very quickly change my mind on the second battery, the battery that controls the aqua tuner. That now has a setting 99, meaning if you've got less than 99 power, don't operate that thing. Basically, don't operate it unless all the solar panels are on, you've got an excess of power. It's not time to turn on the rebel generator, but I'm putting the direction of the reflector in the right place, because if I don't do this now, I'm probably going to get screwed on this later. So this hot abyssalite that is here is actually quite dangerous. So what I want to actually do is dig it out, get a vacuum underneath it, and construct tiles on top of it, such that if any liquid were to land on those tiles, it's not going to cause a huge problem that I've been living with the last little bit. Just plugging in the aqua tuner and steam turbines. Here I'm just watching my dupes construct the new floor that's going to have a vacuum underneath it. Also have to be very careful. I've got some liquid that's in that mesh tile. If I dig the abyssalite underneath it, it's going to drain into that really hot area underneath, which is going to be extremely dangerous. So avoiding that situation. Next to the oil well, I'm building a ladder going down, and this is going to give me access to dig underneath, because I want access to fossil and mainly lead. I'm going to start loading salt water in the cooling line that's going to keep all 3 steam turbines cool. So as I dig down to this area, I'm going to make sure I, at a high priority, dig out those sporchid plants, because if they come in contact with carbon dioxide, things can get very bad. I had to move the battery that was in this flooded area underneath up a little bit. That's going to control the steam turbines to tell it when it needs to operate and put water underneath it. Might as well land this rocket because all the plastic has been used up to create data banks. So I'm going to build a oil line that goes towards the Interplanetary Launcher, because that is going to be the new mechanism that I use to send oil to my homeworld. So I'm going to have this setting here of 190, and that's what's going to control the steam turbine. This is the same thing I have on the other asteroid with that hydro battery system. Over here, the temperature gauge is 500, so that's the point it's going to operate as long as it gets that hot. So I noticed I've got a breaking pipe there because that salt water is not operating around. So I'm going to actually have it continue to go around in a loop. And hopefully that will prevent it from freezing in the pipes. Also, I have a temperature gauge here. It's going to check the temperature of the salt water. And I'm going to set that to be 20 or higher. So the aquatuner will start to run only when the salt water gets above that temperature. I'm going to start to pump some water in this system under or where the aquatuner is. So I'm going to construct a tile next to this pump because I don't want it to be salt water that goes inside. Here you can see I have water going inside this chamber with the aquatuner, and that is ultimately going to turn to steam. I'm hoping I can turn this system on pretty soon because I actually want to heat up the salt water. Actually, there's a pipe missing. That's not allowing it to go through in a cycle. Hopefully that is going to be built and prevent it from breaking any further. So a little bit in the future and we have even more pipes breaking. So I'm very desperate to turn on this system that's going to add heat on top of these steam turbines. I actually don't need the steel yet, but I'm going to produce some along with some other material. And this is solely for the purpose of consuming more power. So hopefully I can get this system running, producing a little bit more heat, preventing that salt water from freezing pipes. So the oil that's in this area is actually infected. So I'm going to actually have that mopped up. And ultimately I'll probably just throw it out in space because I've got enough oil that I'm getting from my oil well. So I'm doing research on home luxuries. I'm not going to be using this in this episode, but probably in the next. So in this system here, I'm building a targeting beacon. This is where the oil is going to land. Otherwise, it would be scattered all across my base, and my dupes would have to run around. I'm going to put a payload opener right next to it so my dupes can throw it in that. And this is going to have oil. And I already have the oil line right conveniently next to it. Overnight, the solar panels had turned off, and I started needing more power. And I'm noticing that that has turned this system on. I've got more power out of it. That has filled up the battery and is telling water to no longer go underneath there. So it's going to conserve the heat only to a point that I actually need power. On this asteroid, the Interplanetary Launcher is ready, but I'm not going to turn the Rebel generator on. That's because my hydro battery still has water. I'm not going to turn it on until that has steam, very hot steam. And I can see in the homeworld the targeting beacon has been constructed and hopefully used in the next episode. So 2 significant projects were completed in this episode. First of all, I got a steam turbine system on the bottom of this base, sitting just above the hot magma that's down there. And that's going to turn that heat into power. Now, that won't last forever, but I have it set up in such a way that it's only going to operate when I'm in actual need of power. So conserving that heat a little bit. On the other asteroid, I've got an interplanetary launcher that is just waiting for my hydro battery to have steam in it so I can put it on. That is going to send oil to the homeworld without the use of a rocket anymore. Anyways, if you want to see some of the other cool projects that I've got planned, like, subscribe, and see you in a future episode.